Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 327, cover dated December 1995. The cover is by Joe Madureira, inked by Tim Townsend, and this is a really memorable cover. It's very quiet, there's no action here. It's quite unusual for the title to have a cover like this, but it's very effective, really well designed. And I like the gestures in it, the fact that the nun is holding this light here and what it symbolizes in terms of some light, some hope for, well, it's very obviously Magneto, but there's a little mystery about who, or rather what has happened to him since the end of Adjectiveless X-Men number 43. You'll find a review of that on the channel, and he's reaching out to the nun as her hand is open here, and the cover caption, "If sins be forgiven." So that has always now been the characterization question with Magneto ever since Uncanny X-Men 150, the degree to which he is a flawed anti-hero but capable of redemption, the degree to which his particular vision of how to help mutant kind involves doing bad things to get to a good end, and how that contrasts with Professor X's alternative vision of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants. So a really nice cover, and I like the computer coloring here as well, detailing the light emerging from the lantern. Yeah, a nice, memorable cover. So let's open this one up to the splash page, and we do get a splash page, and it is not Madureira art on the interior. And this is an interesting opening page where we have the point of view of someone who the children think is dead. It's difficult to draw children, and the artist here has done a very good job. But look at those eyes. Those are very J. Scott Campbell-esque style eyes. And obviously the artist, but here's a big question, has been studying J. Scott Campbell's work, which in 1995 was incredibly popular. So the children here are amazed as regards this person on the ground, a man, and this girl here says, "Let's check to make sure if he's dead or not. Hey, mister," she asks. Let's turn the page, and look who it is. It's Magneto in those robes he was wearing when Colossus got the pair of them off Avalon, when Avalon was crashing to Earth, and they managed to get to an escape pod. And Colossus awoke in Antarctica minus Magneto, but it would appear Magneto has landed somewhere else entirely, somewhere in South or Central America. In a later issue of Adjectiveless X-Men, it'll be established, in a later issue of Uncanny X-Men, it'll be established that where he's landed is Guatemala, in fact. So the children are shocked when the man moves. He's not dead at all. And here we get the first person narration of the nun, Sister Maria. If you could have seen him that first day, you would have understood their terror. Here was this man, barely, caked in mud and manure and suffering from exposure, too weak to even find his voice. But she racks around in the chamber of her double-barrel shotgun and tells him, "Don't move. We do not want any trouble here, senor." So she's speaking Spanish. "Leave now or we'll have to shoot." And here's the title of the story, Whispers on the Wind. And the creative team, Scott Lobdell, writer, and Roger Cruz pencils, Tim Townsend and Al Milgrom inks. Now I'll point out where Tim Townsend is inking these opening pages. I'll point out the part of the issue where Al Milgrom comes on board towards the end to finish out the inking on the issue. That's always a major sign when you've got two inkers that the issue was under deadline pressure to get to the printers on time. But here's an interesting little detail here. I'll just go through the other credits there. So we've got Richard Starkings and Comicraft on the digital lettering, and Steve Buccellato and Electric Crayon on the colors. But if we look to the back page here and the advertisement for all the various different X titles, we have here for Uncanny X-Men the creative team of Scott Lobdell, Roger Cruz and Luke Ross. And some of the artwork in this issue does indeed look like Luke Ross rather than Madureira. So I'm a little bit, what would I say? I'm a little bit skeptical that Madureira has done all the art in this issue. I think these opening pages are likely by him, but some of the pages, especially towards the end, look more like Luke Ross. And if you're interested in an issue that he did do of X-Men, that's adjectiveless X-Men from this period, in 1996, it was issue number 48, and you can see his style there, and I will get to reviewing that particular issue soon enough, and it's a lot like some of the drawings in this particular issue. So I think that maybe this credit was done by Starkings in advance of Luke Ross coming in to do a few pages towards the end of the issue to once again get the thing to the printers on time. So Sister Maria here, it's not revealed yet that she is the nun on the cover, but we'll soon see that. She says in her first person narration, she's talking to someone, but we won't learn who that is until the very end of the issue. She says, had I been looking closely enough, it was all there in his eyes, the pain, the pride, and the power. And I like that, and that's a nice panel as well with that close-up on Magneto's eyes there. So he uses his power, somehow manipulating the metal in the gun she's holding, and he manages to say, "Don't threaten me, woman." And she says, I remember a part of my mind being surprised that he spoke German. So that's interesting. The rest of me was praying that if something happened to me, he wouldn't hurt the children. I need not have worried. So the children say to him, "Please, mister," and he turns around in surprise. "Please don't do anything to her." Seeing the fear in their eyes, almost seemed to frighten himself. "Did he spare me out of compassion," she asks, "or out of exhaustion? I may never know." So he drops to the ground. Now, this particular issue is solely focused on this story of Magneto. There is no subplot in here. There is no cutting away to what's going on with the X-Men in New York or anything like that. And I like this, that we have a kind of what they call in television, bottle episode. So it's just focused on Magneto, no subplots, no cutaways to anywhere else. And it's the one location, this orphanage for these children here, that is overseen by this not nurse, but nun, Sister Maria. So for 3 days and nights, he staggered in and out of consciousness. On the 4th day, mercifully, his fever broke. But she's got him tied to the bed there, and she realizes now that he probably was strong enough to free himself, but he didn't. Instead, he seemed to be watching us, just as some of us were watching him, the children outside, as Migdalia certainly was. "Good morning, Signor," she says. "I heard you were awake. My name is Sister Maria. Welcome to one of God's humbler homes." So she's got breakfast for him. And what I like about this story, and what's interesting too, is that Magneto's course, ever since Adjectiveless X-Men #1, has been set in terms of a type of almost religious fervor, religious war, because of Fabian Cortez and the Acolytes treating him like he's some kind of messiah. And what I didn't like about those stories of the Acolytes and Magneto was it kind of focused on like the negative aspect of religion, or people with religious faith. And that's like a common trope in present day media. Whereas what I like about this story is we see the other side of things. We see the potentially good side of religion and religious faith in this particular story. And I just like to see that balance. It's not to say that one or the other is entirely correct. Like, there are various types of people who are religious and they're either good or bad. But I like seeing the other side presented in an issue of Uncanny X-Men. So she comes to him and asks him his name, but he doesn't give a name. And then he asks her about the fact that she's speaking English. "You're speaking English," he says. "Other day when you tried to kill me, I spoke Spanish." "Yes," she says. Now, I like the drawing of the hands here. Hands are difficult to draw. So if this is Madureira, and I think it is on these pages, he's doing a good job on the hands. And she says, "I spoke Spanish." "Yes, but that was before you rambled on about nonsense for 3 days in English and German. Since I don't sprechen Sie Deutsch," that's a very Lobdell kind of thing to have her say. "And for the record, I was not trying to kill you," she says, "although you might feel differently after you've tasted." But he says he can feed himself, and off he goes. So nice little quiet scenes here, but a mystery building about Magneto and the fact that it seems like he's amnesiac now after falling to Earth from Avalon. So the sister says as she looks out the window, "If I'm not prying, where were you going before you decided to quote unquote visit our orphanage?" And he says, "I have no idea. In fact, I don't feel as though I remember much of anything." So he is amnesiac, and she says to him, "It's settled then." As it is, you have no memories of who you are or where you belong. Until you're well enough to travel, you're welcome to stay here. Of course, you're free to leave whenever you like. So Magneto says, that's very generous, sister, but how can you know me, trust me, when I don't even know myself? And she says, I have it on good authority that everything happens for a reason. You're only here because you're supposed to be. So a belief in providence there. But he looks in the mirror, he picks up a mirror, a broken mirror in fact, and asks the question, who are you and why do I fear the answer? So interesting. He shaves the next day, or maybe it's later that morning, and he's revealed to be not the Magneto that we're used to as a man in midlife, but rather as if he's in his 20s. But why does that feel so wrong? He asks. That's a good shot there of Magneto shaving in the mirror with the wash basin and Migdalia looking on. This looks like it's in the barn. That's nicely done. The rendering of the musculature on the side of his body. And again, is it Madureira? Is it Luke Ross? I'm not 100% sure. I think maybe this page is Madureira though, because you see that little aping or imitation of, not Madureira, Cruz. Sorry, excuse me, Roger Cruz. You see that little aping of Madureira's style, which is distinctive of Cruz in this period. So in any case, there's shots fired from out in the fields, the wheat fields, and Magneto shouts out, filthy Nazis, I'll teach them to, and he's interrupted by the girl who says, please Joseph, stay here. They are the bad men fighting each other, just ignore them as we do, please. And he is persuaded by her. Very well, Migdalia, he says, let's get back to the house though. And she asks him, but why did you call them Nazis? And he doesn't know, he honestly doesn't know. And he's taken the name Joseph at this point as well. And that is the name that this character will go by for at least a year and a half into the continuity of the comics, up to issue 350 at least. So the weeks went by and Joseph came to learn about our country, which as I said is revealed to be Guatemala in later issues. A beautiful, blessed place, drenched in the blood of lives bought and sold with drug money. For all intents and purposes, we knew as little about Joseph as we did when he first arrived, except that the children adored him. And this is interesting too. She's got an old copy of a Time magazine with the X-Men, the Silver Age X-Men, the Neil Adams era X-Men on the cover. And they're nicely drawn too. So, and she says she was thankful for the company. So we get a quiet moment now between the sister and Joseph, where they're looking up at this CGI generated moon. And he says that, you know, it's a beautiful night. Much more so, I'm afraid, than a man like me deserves. So he has qualms of conscience, but he doesn't have a full memory of his past life. And so she tells him, you're speaking nonsense again. But he says, somehow in my soul, I did things I'm not proud of. Dark things, evil things, things that should not be forgiven. And she responds and says, whatever happened, happened in your past, Joseph. I've been taught there is nothing that cannot be forgiven. No sin that cannot be absolved. None. Not if your heart is, and it looks as if he's about to move in for a kiss. And this is a nice little sequence. She says, Joseph, you're a good man, true, as she pushes him away gently and puts something in his hand. But absolutely no competition for the one I have. Thank you. So he's got the crucifix there in the palm of his hand. I could feel his smile on my back, and I could not help thinking it had probably been a long time since this man had any hope at all in his heart. So this is all going swimmingly for Joseph/Magneto so far, but can it last? And who were those men fighting each other in the fields? Well, we're going to get to that now in the second half of the story. Now this is a nice page here, but I think we've shifted to the Luke Ross portion of the art. This doesn't look like the same face for Joseph Magneto as in the previous pages. And the anatomy is that bit different as well. So this is my conjecture that we've moved on to the Luke Ross portion of the issue. But that's a nice top-down shot on that tractor there. And I like the little child's drawing there of Magneto on a horse. That's pretty cool. And this is nice as well, the detail of the horse there in the background. So the child's name is Umberto, and Joseph says, you know, he likes the drawing, but what is it? And Umberto says, it's named a mutant. I learned all about them in school. A mutant. They're different from real people, says the child. That is why they wear masks and hide, because regular people are fearing them. I like this choice here to silhouette everything. The bit of scrub there, Magneto, or Joseph rather, examining the drawing, and the tractor again. So Sister Maria is calling for them, or waving to them maybe. And then Joseph lifts the tractor with his magnetic powers. And just look at the pitchfork there, a little glint of light on it, because that's going to come into play in the third panel here. So Joseph had never once showed any evidence of his life before his time with us until that day. So the pitchfork is lifted with his magnetic powers until the day he felt the children were somehow being threatened. Even so, turn the page here, I'm willing to give him points for moderation. So who's this guy? So this guy is a colonel, Colonel Ramos, and he wants to have private words with Sister Maria. And Migdalia says that the colonel is a jerk. We hate him. That's a nice drawing there of the colonel with his face kind of bunched up and away from the tip of the pitchfork. That's nicely done. But again, I think these are Luke Ross pages. So Migdalia explains he's with the government and is supposed to protect us from the bad people, but we all think he's getting paid by them. And this child says, even Sister Maria says, we should not talk to him if we don't have to. And Joseph says, Sister Maria is a smart woman of discerning taste. So the child doesn't quite know what to respond to that level of vocabulary. Yeah, she says. And Migdalia says, besides, now that you live here, we don't need the colonel. You'll protect us, right? And just look at his response. One word response, yes. That's it. No hesitation, no doubts, just a straight yes. He's going to protect those children, even as he looks at Sister Maria talking with the colonel. And then he goes back to work on the tractor. Now, that's a nice pose there. I wonder, did the artist, and I think this is Luke Ross again, use some photo reference for this? It looks good. And the sister says that she noticed that Magneto's attention lay elsewhere. So almost a week passes, 6 days later, and she says that's when she would discover how right that feeling was. At times he would gaze at the far horizon as if searching for something, his destiny, perhaps. It wasn't there when he first saw it, the fire. I'm sure his first thought was of the children. I can imagine him using his mutant ability to close the distance, as indeed he did, only to discover the barn was all but burnt to the ground and the children and me gone. And somebody's giving him an ironical round of applause, and it's that Colonel Ramos. So you knew he was a bad egg. And he says here, I'm sorry we got off to a bad start, but I think you and I are going to be great friends. Joseph, is it? It doesn't look like they are. So Joseph asks him, and why is that, Colonel? Because we both have something the other wants. You're a mutant. I happen to need a mutant. That is, my business associates, in quotation marks, and I could use a man of your abilities to help with certain law enforcement agencies that seek to stop our export business, so drugs, obviously. Interesting, says Joseph. And what is it you have to offer me? And the Colonel says, and this is the big mistake, I have the children and your friend. My associates are keeping an eye on them. If you were to run an errand or two for us, I might be able to convince my friends to. But look at this, he's immediately wrapped in barbed wire. And Joseph says, I will only ask this once into the man's ear. Where? And the Colonel is shocked. He says to him, if you kill me, you won't ever find them. Who said anything about killing you? Says Joseph. He's squeezing him with the barbed wire. And the Colonel says he can't breathe. Certainly you can. It simply hurts a lot. So the Colonel says, all right, they're in the basement of the old church. Thank you. Now leave. And he flings him away and don't come back ever. So the man must be dead at the end of that. And now he's on the horse. So this is what Umberto drew. He drew this image and it proved to be predictive. So he gets the horse from the burning barn, is even wearing that purple cloak. It could be the one that he was found in, repaired a little bit maybe. Again, this is not Madureira, this is Luke Ross, I'm pretty sure of that. And also we have switched here on this particular page to Al Milgrom inks. So Al Milgrom's inks are a little rougher. Tim Townsend's inks are very precise and very careful. whereas it always feels to me that Al Milgrom inks at speed, but it works well for things like the interior, or this looks like the basement of their house actually, because there's barrels there and the piping, so I think they're hiding in the basement, or they are in the basement of the old church, sorry, yeah, that's where they are. And in particular, Milgrom's inks look very good on the last page. I'll mention that when we get to the last page. So the sister's there trying to comfort the children who are scared, of course, and she's saying, trust in God, has he not let us down yet? And then suddenly silence, footsteps, someone's coming. So Maria tries to calm the children. How do you know, sister, that everything's going to be fine? Because, child, because I knew he was there before I saw him. So it's Magneto, the savior, and there he is, reaching out his hand. Definitely, there's something about that 3/4 reverse profile that's distinctive of Luke Ross's work in this period. So again, I'm quite sure that these final pages are by Luke Ross and not Madureira, despite the credits. So he comes through the basement door and he offers his stained hand like some avenging angel sent from on high to deliver us to freedom. So he comes and says, it's time for you and your charges to go home. And she says to the person she's talking to in the present, that may be the moment I'll remember always, when the word home stuck in his throat, as if it may have been the first time he'd ever used it, or the first time in a long time that it meant anything at all to him, which only makes what happened next all the more tragic. And that is always the way with Magneto. Just as it seems everything is going right for him, just as it seems that he really is redeeming himself, something goes tragically wrong. And it's this: he has murdered the colonel's quote-unquote associates, and gorily as well. And the sister's aghast, what have you done? And he says, only what I had to, sister. And that is Magneto's guiding ethics. Only what he has to do, and he's prepared to make the hard choices, but it's his decision to be judge, jury, and executioner, which is very different from Professor X's ethos. So Umberto, who had come to love Joseph the most, is absolutely scared of the man, and the children are all silent. In the midst of all that quiet, the only sound to be heard was that of several hearts breaking. So we're coming to the end of the story. By the way, one little criticism here, or one, maybe it's more of a comment, is this would have been more effective if it had occurred on a page turn. So if we turned the page and then got this, it would have been that bit more impactful, I think. But you can't have everything, yes. So he left this morning. So we're coming into the present now of the sister speaking. And she tells him he doesn't have to go. The children will eventually forget, but he says that's not true. How can I ask them to accept me, my powers, my ways, when even I don't understand them? I've learned a lot in the past several weeks, more, I suspect, than I have in my entire life. But that's the point, isn't it? There's too much of my life that remains a mystery. Until it's solved, I can't share my life with anyone. But she gives him the rolled up copy, an old copy of Time magazine, which she picked up when she was studying in the States. And she basically tells him that he should try and find them. And then you might finally have a place to call your home. And of course, that's ironic, yes. Without another word, he left. And so she's been talking to the priest all the time. That's who she's been talking to, Father Helzio. And she asked, did I do the right thing? And the priest says, I'm afraid I cannot say for certain, sister. If this man is who you suspect that he is, because she has a suspicion that he is Magneto, the mutant master of magnetism, the man called Magneto, who has spent much of his adult life as a sworn enemy of all that is human, it is possible you may have unleashed a horror upon the rest of the world. That is some statement there. And look at the look in her eye. But he holds her hand and he says, but I'd like to believe otherwise. I choose to believe you saw something in him, maybe actually gave him the faith he needed to allow him to at last use his power to help a humanity that has been less than kind to his people. So that is an interesting, hopeful conclusion, and that's really nice colouring there from Steve Buccellato. And this is where Milgrom's inks really work well, with the rocky background, the sand, and his hatching there of the waves crashing on the shore. That's a really nice final panel. So Joseph walks He's walking to the USA. Sister, you and I are in the business of second chances, says the priest. All we can do now is pray for this man's soul, that he might at last find his place in this world, and that place is on the side of the angels. So, yet another opportunity for Magneto to have a redemptive character arc. It wouldn't quite work out as was kind of signaled here in this particular issue, but I like this issue. The art is not the most fantastic or amazing art of the period, but it's very competent. It really tells the story well, and I think that Madureira Roger Cruz has been improving, and Luke Ross does a good job on his portion of pages as well. So one other thing I want to note before I end the review is the advertisement here for the Starjammers miniseries. And this one was written by Warren Ellis and drawn by Carlos Pacheco. So if you're interested in me reviewing that miniseries, which I do have, let me know in the comments to the video. So do like the video on YouTube, because it really helps the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.